Senang bertemu kembali anda bersama saya Theresa Goh dan kita berada di Bersama Malaysia membincangkan tentang isu-isu sebelum bajet 2015 diumumkan dan juga dibentangkan oleh Perdana Menteri pada petang ini. Dan antara isu yang akan saya bincangkan pada hari ini adalah antaranya percukaian dan setelah membincangkan tentang pemborongan, peruncitan, pelancongan dan pelbagai isu lain. Dan kita akan bincangkan tentang GST dan juga percukaian bersama dengan dua tetamu saya di Bersama Malaysia ketika ini iaitu Farah Rosley, Rakan Niaga Perkhidmatan Percukaian untuk Perniagaan daripada Ernst & Young Malaysia dan juga Theresa Goh, Rakan Niaga Percukaian Deloitte Malaysia dan juga ahli lembaga MIKPA. Hi, thank you for joining us. I think first of all, let's do the discussion in English. I think first of all, we would like to look at the GST and look at it as a whole. Next year, the implementation will start on the 1st of April. And I think there's still a lot of skepticism on whether some quarters are prepared or not, or some sectors are prepared or not. How do we look at the implementation as a whole? There's only 6 months to go before we go to implementing GST. And earlier when we discussed about the wholesale and retail sector, there are still some pockets here and there who are not very clear, or people who are not very clear and they're not very in tandem with the implementation of GST. How do we go about making sure that we are ready for that? Maybe Theresa, you'd like to start first?
Yes. Okay, I think the Customs Department has been working very hard over the past few years, and they have actually issued many industry guidelines, right? And they've been having a lot of talks. But in addition to this, I think there is still a wish list. People expecting to see more goods included in the zero-rated list, in the exempt list, right? So, I mean, before we go into that, I think it's important to understand what's the meaning of zero-rated and what's the meaning of exempt. So to the consumer, you think, okay, it doesn't matter whether it's zero-rated or exempt. To me, the price will be the same, but actually the price will not be the same. So if you look at the impact of GST on prices, with GST, the prices can go 3 ways, right? It can either go up, it can go down, or it can remain the same. So let's look at it, each type of goods. So if you talk about zero-rated, for example, so everybody knows this is very restrictive, right? It's just your basic necessities, right? Your foodstuff, right? Your basic necessities, and as well as exports. So when you look at exports, how does it concern you and I, who are not in business, right? As what do you mean by exports? So we had our friend earlier from Mata and all that talking about etiquettes. So if you look at etiquettes, for example, on exports, if we were to fly directly an etiquette from KL to Melbourne, for example, so that is zero-rated, so which means that there is no GST. But if the person doesn't live in KL but lives in Kota Baru and is going to go to Melbourne to study, so it's got to buy a ticket from Kota Baru to KL and then KL to Melbourne. So there are questions like, okay, now how is this going to work then? You've got a local leg and you've got an international leg. So is the whole thing going to be considered as export so that it's exempt from GST or zero-rated, or how? So the question is, number one, is it going to be on the same invoice or same ticket? So if you talk about it being on the same ticket, then you can't fly Air Asia one leg and fly MAS another leg, right? Because it'll be different tickets, number one. Number two, can you stop over? So some countries have this rule that if you stop over, if it's less than 24 hours, then you're fine. Otherwise, from Kota Baru, you come to KL, you may need to take an immediate connecting flight, to fly off to Melbourne in order for the Kota Baru and KL leg to be exempt from GST. I mean, that's one of the things. So when we talk about the pricing, right, coming back to the pricing, if it's zero-rated, what it means is that the government absorbs the GST. That's what it means by zero-rated, all along the way. The entire value chain, right? Because GST is like, the GST on each value of each business, right? So the entire value chain, the GST is absorbed by the government. That's zero-rated, which means for the business, there is no impact. Okay, so for the business, when you sell, there is no GST, but when you buy, you may have a GST, but GST on what you purchase, that's what we call input GST, that one you can get a refund from the government. That's why I say it's fully funded by the government, right? So in this kind of situation, the business doesn't bear any additional tax, right? So in terms of pricing, it shouldn't increase, right? Prices shouldn't increase. So that's one thing.
But you mentioned that some price of goods and also services will see an increase moving forward after the implementation of the GST.
Yes.
But how do we balance this with spending power? Because I think at the current tax rate, there are people saying that, maybe we should also look at the current income tax or personal income tax rate, so that when you implement GST, people would
Right.
still have money to spend. People will still
Yes.
have, the spending power
Yes.
will not be so much affected
Yes.
by the GST. How do we go about
Yes.
balancing getting revenues for the nation, but also at the same time making sure that people can still spend
Yes.
when they move forward? How
Right.
do we do that?
I think our PM has a very difficult job at this point in time, right? Trying to reduce
Strike
our
the balance.
deficit, right? Not
Yes,
only,
yes.
trying to reduce our deficit, and you've only got this much of revenue, and in how many ways can it go, right? So I believe in two things. One thing is we've done the good thing, that is widen the tax net and have GST in, right? To have more people paying tax now based on consumption. But in addition to that, I think there's one more thing that the government can do. And that is, I mean, you've got numbers being bandied around, and 2.2 million out of our total workforce that are only paying tax, right?
Yeah.
So there's a big group of them out there who are not paying taxes. And these are actually the small businesses, not so much of SME, but the small businesses, like the petty traders, the hawkers and all that, right? So how do you get these people to pay tax? And what's the reason why they're not paying tax in the first place? You ask. I think there are two reasons. One is it's very burdensome. These people will not have receipts when they go to the market to buy vegetables or buy the ingredients. It's difficult for them to get the receipts, to keep the receipts, to prepare the profit and loss account,
Is
to
there a
determine
way
how
we
much
can
is the
make it
profit.
easy for them to
Yes.
be a part of the contribution, to be a part of
Yes.
the group that contributes to the nation's revenue, maybe?
Yeah, that is. It's a very good question, because the MICPA has actually come up with this and proposed, MICPA and MIA actually have proposed this, right? That you introduce a simplified tax system for them. No need to keep accounting records, only need to know how much is your sales. And if you're in this business, then the IRB can publish, right? This business, your profit is 5%. This business, your profit is 2%. So you just need to have records on your sales. And then if your profit is supposed to be 5% on that, you just pay tax on that 5%. So that would make it very simple, for people to
Can
pay
we
tax.
use this simplified approach, if I may use that word, the phrase, simplified approach to record keeping, to maybe with the GST as well? Because I think earlier we discussed on how difficult it is for mums and pups shops to get on board with the GST, and on how some businesses or some medium scale SMEs or PKS might need a bit more time to understand and to also be part of the whole GST program. How do we simplify things for them so that they can also be on board? Because I know that, or according to LHDN, in the IRB, only about 70,000 companies are paying tax, or 70,000 companies are paying tax, and only about 2.2 million Malaysians are paying tax. How do we get more people on board so that revenue can increase, at the same time that the burden of tax on the small group of individuals or companies can be reduced? How do we do that?
Yeah, that's a very valid question, Rizal. And echoing what Theresa has said as well, SMEs have got, tax is one part of the equation, right? You should not forget they also have other challenges in the business, right? You said record keeping. How do they improve their system, branding of their products,
adding
right?
value to the products and services
Adding
that we discussed
value.
just now.
We spoke about it just now, and locally, in the local context as well as going international, because we are always talking about making them push them out, so that they go outside. But from a GST perspective, it is a change management that's required, right? These are the sectors or the segments who have not been in the tax bracket, number one. Or once they get to the tax bracket, once they achieve the threshold, then they will be needed to register for GST, right? And as we know, registration, companies must register by 31st December. Yeah, and at the moment the numbers is slowly picking up, but it's not reaching to the number that is aspired by the government. So it is the awareness, education. There are guidelines, there are rulings, there are lots of publications that's been issued for that. From that perspective, on the other hand, support is also needed to be given to these businesses. Manpower availability, training, right? If I say some of the wish lists that can be given to these business segments are probably training, deductions on training, which is already given in some aspect in the previous budgets, but maybe further extension to the training. Employment of graduates, right? Deduction on employment of graduates, special incentive, right? Currently we have a reduced tax rate for SMEs, but maybe a further reduction whereby they can actually plow back the tax safe and grow the business further and use it for the employees, say for example, or branding of their product, or move into technology automation, say for example, rather than manual. But these are the steps that needs to be taken. Baby steps, yes, maybe for the moms and the pops types of businesses, maybe baby steps, but it is actually a move towards achieving a higher value chain, for example.
I think I'd like to share my thoughts on that as well. In the first place, their business has got to be in excess of 500,000 a year, yeah, before they need to be licensed. So if we talk about the mom and pop shops, right, not all of them may have reached that kind of turnover, right? So if they're below that turnover, they don't need to worry about GST, right? And probably the business will increase as well, because they may be selling the same things, yeah, taxable goods, right, compared to a hypermarket, for example. Hypermarket's business definitely would have to be more than 500,000, and they would have to register for GST, and they will have a 6% additional cost. But the mom and pop store, you can sell the same thing, but without the GST. So your price would definitely be lower. Yeah. So if for us, I mean, smart consumers, you don't have to buy everything. Yeah. Maybe without the comfort of the air conditioning, but you can get the goods cheaper. So that's one thing they can do. I think the other thing that another way that the government can help them is actually, I think the call has been made as well by businesses, small businesses. Give us an IT software that we can use to account for GST. I mean, like it was said earlier, it's difficult. They're not IT literate. They don't know how to do it, and so on, right? So they need that software. And I think in Australia, the same request was made by the small businesses. But unfortunately, I think what I heard was all that was given was actually more like an Excel sheet for them to complete. So maybe if it's something like that that's given to them, then they don't really need to do a quarterly return or something like that. Maybe do a half-yearly return to minimize the cost. And perhaps the service providers that are helping these people to do this, give them some kind of a rebate or something, so that they can charge less. So these small businesses are not burdened, yeah, with the cost of trying to comply.
And I heard the Prime Minister is also looking at things to be zero-rated, to be included in that zero-rated list. So the Prime Minister will hopefully announce that during the tabling of the budget later today.
Yes.
But do you have a wish list on what things should be zero-rated and what things should maybe not be 6%? Maybe 3%, because I think the Real Estate Housing Development Association recently announced that if you were to implement GST on house prices, the price of affordable house will actually increase by about 3 or 4%. That would be more burdensome to consumers or to house buyers, I guess. But is there a list of things that you hopefully want it to be zero-rated or exempted? Maybe you can start, Farah.
Yeah. You talk about zero-rated. Everybody has their own wish list. Even I have my own wish list. But I think from a perspective of the economy, the current zero-rating proposed items are basic necessities. That is definitely a must, so that it creates a balance. Those things will not increase per se. In fact, some of the things may go down because GST will replace sales tax. So if you have, say, clothing, say for example, it's 10%. So with GST, the base price for the item from a manufacturer should reduce because sales tax is excluded out of that item. So the 6% is on a lesser amount rather than on a higher amount. So, and in terms of what should be added on should be basic necessities, and even probably things like education, which is currently exempted, but of course there are various segments or various sectors that we're looking at, and the escalation of houses. We are talking about prices of houses going up, but that is even before GST. So with the base of a very high amount, the last 10 years, the price has gone up really high. The 6% or even the 3% of house prices will not really make an impact on the base price of the houses. It's already high. So other cooling measures would need to be done on the prices of the house. Maybe stamp duty reliefs, maybe higher stamp duties on fourth, fifth, or third, fourth, fifth houses, right? And it's not just on the GST, and also on the other part could be a further reduction of personal tax. The move last year by increasing the band, the highest bracket from is now increased to 400,000, and there's a reduction in personal tax will release more disposable income to the to the individuals to spend more on basic necessities.
Okay, Theresa?
I think, okay, I have my wish list there as well, right? When we talk about basic necessities, because not everything is really included. So when you talk about like rice, sugar, flour and all that, when you talk about sugar, for example, castor sugar and icing sugar are not in that list, right? When you talk about oil, now people are a bit more healthy, so you go on to sunflower oil and olive oil and all that, and sesame oil. These are not included as well. So people are hoping to see that, these will also be included. And something that all of us take and it's good for health, like fruits, it's not in the list. It's not in the zero-rated list. So that's something as well. But I think more important than all of these, like ICT equipment, sports equipment, fuel, and all that, more important than this is actually something very dear to our hearts. That's medicine, right? So as you know, healthcare is exempt, right? So no GST. But healthcare only with regard to those that are registered with the MHE, right? So if you were to buy medicine, okay, you see a doctor in a hospital, right? And they prescribe medicine. That one is without the GST.
But if you go to a clinic,
if you go to a clinic, it's fine. Also no GST. But if you were to buy the medicine from a pharmacy, that one has GST. So perhaps that one, I think, is very important, because why do people go to pharmacies in the first place? Because now it's kind of expensive even to go to a clinic, right? The consultation fees have gone up, right? So one visit could cost you a minimum of 50 ringgit or more, right? So if you go to the pharmacy and just get a medicine, especially if you know that's your normal ailment and you've been taking that drug or that medicine for a long time, then it's cheaper for you to get it from the pharmacy. But the 6% service tax is not going to help. So I think that is one area that the government should really look at.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, I think we want to look at how to make the country competitive. Looking at the tax regime, also tax incentive that is given to companies to set up some carry or tax incentive that has been going on for 10 years for foreign investment, for domestic investment. How do we go about balancing those tax incentives and making sure that the government gets money and making sure that people can still come to this country and they still want to invest in this country? And how do we go about doing that? And the current corporate tax rate, which is at about 25% maximum, do we need to relook at that? How do we go about making sure that Malaysia is competitive, in 2015 and moving forward? Kita akan berhenti berehat seketika, kembali selepas ini.